Is epistemology more in the foreground of the IDM and ontology more in the background?
Yeah, there's a sense in which knowing is treated as a process. Whereas, like for instance, if I was talking about the like what are these things? You have ontology is about being, epistemology is about knowing. That's a kind of dynamic, and becoming is a kind of dynamic. And so in effect, when we're looking at, well, how do we know anything about being? Then in effect I'm saying something that's oriented from knowing. And what is the way in which I can even have a notion of what is good knowing? Well, that's going to reach back into the notion of value, which is what axiology is. And if I say, what is the basis of axiology? Then to some extent it has to reach back into being, i.e. ontology again. So in effect, it's like the relationship between ontology, epistemology, and axiology is like tracing backwards through the axiom 2 cycle. Right. So in other words, if I'm saying how do I know anything about ontology? I'm tracing back into the precursor of that. And when I say, well, what does it mean to have, a good epistemology? Well, I have to talk about the value. And when I say, well, what is the ground of value? Well, I have to go back into ontology. You see, so in that sense, they each depend upon the others. But the relationship of the actual practice of metaphysics as a tool is sort of like we're exploring what are the assumptions. Like, so for instance, in the same sense that I said, what are the assumptions of ontology? Well, there's an assumption of the assumption of ontology is epistemology. The assumption of epistemology is axiology. The assumption of axiology is ontology, right? But the practice, if I'm looking at it as a sort of dynamic of what I'm doing, then in each case I'm doing things like I'm looking to clarify the essence of something. I'm looking to clarify the assumptions or to clarify, what is the basis. It's like an exploration of the basis. And so in this sense, the practice of clarification is more of an epistemic technique. And so in that sense, it's foregrounding the notion of epistemology, because from there, we're getting clarity about ontology and we're getting clarity about axiology. So in a sense, the metaphysics starts out as obviously a conversation. Like we entered into a conversation. The book itself is a kind of conversation. I mean, it's as if I said everything in the book to you. You're reading it. You're hearing a kind of voice, or maybe you're thinking about it conceptually. It's in the realm of form at that point. And so, it is an abstraction. It is an object of perception, but it points back to the nature of the process of perception. But the process of perception is held within oneself, within one's first person experience. And then it's a clarification of the process of perception, right? So it goes into looking at the root tautology, like, well, let's see, perception is a kind of interaction. An interaction and a perception are both a kind of measurement. Each measurement is a kind of comparison. Oh, wait, we can actually know something about comparison. So now all of a sudden we can know something about perception. Does that help? I mean, does it again, these are things that I sort of start with, but if we basically hold it at the level of concept for a period of time, we begin to start to understand how to use these clarities. We begin to sort of notice what are the ways in which these patterns work. And at a certain point, we begin to realize that the abstraction of subjective and objective are not, like, those are concepts, but they're concepts that point to real things. And at a certain juncture, you recognize that it's not about the subjective or the objective. It's about your personal subjective and the objective of the world you're in. And about that point, you begin to notice that it's not conceptual anymore.